What is up, guys? You know the line. Another Friday, another live stream. Starting out strong. Gonna get a few more people in here before we really dive into her. But new shiny old Jeep in the shop, baby. Little twin turbo action out of this one. I'll go deeper into it. Hopefully the owner will be showing up in the chat soon enough. But yeah, so let's get into her. Let's do a little update. More work going on in this baby. Fuel system in. Going on. So you can see the fuel lines, fuel pump, filter. I shouldn't say pump. That is just the filter. Bunch of fun stuff. You can't really see the pump. It's all the way up in there. These Jeeps are not the most fun to do this on, but you know, we make it happen. So we drop the tank. A little header action. Little header. You already saw this one. This was the vehicle over there on that lift that was getting the Whipple, all that stuff. So just new lift. We use different lifts for different reasons. So yeah, you can see the split up there. But yeah, Arturo's making it happen as always. So doing his magic. But the Meekins Mobile finally in. Looking pretty, looking shiny. We got Joe and John over here diving into her. How's she spinning? Loosey-goosey. Loosey-goosey. Perhaps because it's got it. But blower's coming off. Heads are coming off. Broke a valve spring. So we're just trying to diagnose how far that goes, what it took out, you know, how lucky we got. We do have new heads to go on here. So should leave here making a little bit more power and much happier. So customer built his own twin turbo kit. It's down there. I might get down there and show y'all. I think I will. But you can kind of see parts of it. The turbos are more mounted up in there, so it's kind of hard to see when it's not lifted. But yeah, she's back in here. What's up, Chris? How you doing this Friday? Beautiful little truck. So again, parts are in. We're just waiting for a technician to open up to jump onto her. So shouldn't be too much longer. I'm really, really excited to see what this thing does. You guys are going to love it. It's going to be fun, fun, fun. I see my buddy Ryan in the chat. Ryan, your car is off the lift, baby. Off the lift and out there. So almost ready for you to pick her up. But let's see what else we got going on. This one started out as level 1.5, then it morphed into a cam, a whole bunch of other stuff, but she is finally back together. Had a few header enjoyments. So we started off Stainless Works, got a couple headers from them, ended up going Texas Speed because there was some warpage. Have not had a problem with these Texas Speeds. So not too hot. I can touch them, but they're pretty little headers and definitely worth it in my opinion. But yeah, let's see what else we got. Turbo Jeep update. Let's see where we're at here. I see a manifold started to be mounted. So we're close, Wade. We're close. But yeah, manifold's in there, almost done, and then not too terribly much after that. But progress is being made. Of course, Matt on the detailing side, knocking it out as always. This beautiful Dodge Magnum. You know, look at this thing. But just a basic silver wash, nothing crazy. It's a pile of junk. But so. See what other updates we got. Shop car still for sale. Someone buy it. 65. Can work with you if you want anything done special to it. So, yeah. Is the shop truck for sale?
What's that?
Is the shop truck for sale?
Everything is for sale.
Everything's for sale. If you want a shop truck, you can get you a shop truck. Send us a DM and might be able to work something out on that little green beauty. But yeah, that's about it for this week. There's nothing too crazy. Hopefully that car will be done shortly. But yeah, nice little update for y'all. So let's head inside the old office and get into the could use, should use, dyno. What's the differences? Are they all built equal? Oh, we are? Oops. Well, let me grab my sheet. I'm at the wrong spot, y'all. We got Joe. He loves you. What's that? Huh? Okay. He doesn't talk much. All right, let's see about...
Oh, I'm going to hold on to it. So.
Oh, okay.
Hey, look at that. What's going on, everybody? So we're going to take a little time to kind of go over dynos, why they read different. You know, you see all the time, we mention and other people mention that dynos will vary depending on what dyno it is, where it is, and kind of break down the reasons why. You're going to see shops all over. We use it for tuning tool, use it for advertisement, use it for data collection, but you got to at least kind of get a good understanding of what goes into it, right? The reasons on why we might see what we see. So what I'm doing now is I'm actually pulling up an example of essentially what this is two TRXs. And one pull was done in 4th gear and one pull was done in 5th. And then I'm going to kind of break down and go over the reasons why this information is so important. So you like I said, when comparing or seeing what other people post, you have a very, very good idea of what's going on. So right out of the gate, to break down what a dyno is doing, I'm going to put it in simplest terms possible to help people out. Generally, a dyno is reading the speed of which it changes the roller speed from a starting speed to the ending speed. So I use an example from 50 miles an hour to 100 miles an hour, right? The rate at which it does that, the time, will determine the amount of torque. That's what it comes down to. And then horsepower is a math calculation. So at any given time, that speed from 1 mile an hour to the next is what's going to determine the output that the dyno gives you. That's why torque numbers are so important, because that's actually how horsepower is determined, is by that actual torque number. We use RPM references on different dynos. That's also important in regards to the readout. But at the end of the day, you don't need an actual RPM reference if you're doing a dyno pull in 1-to-1 gear ratio and you have the proper wheel tire gear ratio input into the computer system so it knows. You actually don't need an RPM reference. Now, that's the importance of calibrating the dyno and making sure that information is correct. Okay, so that's part of what goes into manipulating a dyno output. Of course, there's correction factors. There's STD, SAE, and a bunch of others. That is a predetermined calculation in regards to the correction factor. Now, there are certain manufacturers of dynos that allow you to change that correction factor and put in a manual correction factor. So, generally with STD, SAE, what it's doing is it is utilizing weather and temperatures to determine what adjustment it should make to an uncorrected reading. So you can do that at any dyno. You can put an uncorrected reading in, and then when you throw this correction, it will multiply that output by 1.04, right? If you have very bad weather, like today, it's 90 degrees in the shop, humidity's high, so naturally it would erase the number from the uncorrected dyno readings because of that. Now, if you have a really, really cold day, DA is beautiful, you might actually have a reduction in the correction if you're using a standard or SAE correction factor. There, older softwares and stuff used to allow you to actually put in your correction factor, 1.04, 1.06. So guys at low altitude would go in and do 1.1 so that their dynos would read what they think was closer to sea level. It doesn't always equate out to be that. So that's why our readings, we use STD from DynoJet. I can't manipulate the correction factor. It is based on, I have this little guy here that picks up the weather, the reading, the humidity, all this stuff like that, and it determines the correction factor for me. So what's also important in regards to my data entry, right? Obviously, we have to tell the dyno what's going on. So I'm going to go over kind of how that works in the factor, right? So we have the ability to get RPM referenced by a pickup that goes onto a coil or there it is. So generally on our Gen 3 Hemis, we use that on a coil. LS1s and distributor-based cars or have a different type of pickup, but you can get that. And then what the dyno is thinking is no matter what gear you're in on the dyno, it thinks you're going to be 1-to-1 ratio. So on an 8-speed, it's 6 gear. So that's how it's determining the approximate torque. That's why you can also alter a reading by changing what gear ratio you are doing your pull in. So optimal is 1-to-1. Now, depending on the tire height and the rear gear, we don't always do 1-to-1 with these 8-speed transmissions and even the 5-speeds because it can get to a very high mile an hour. So, for example, the shop car, when I revved it to 7,000 RPM in 6 gear with our setup, it hit 216 miles an hour on the dyno. There are some dynos that don't allow you to do that. So guys will naturally have to run in a lower gear. So as long as the consistent results shared are in that same type of gear ratio, you're going to get consistent outputs in regards to differences, right? We use it here mainly for before and afters to show what modifications you're doing, what effect they have. Okay. Now there are some vehicles where we have aftermarket coils on it, and it's a bad signal, right? Or spark plug gap might not be too good, or battery alternator's low, and we're having struggles. So I'm going to flip the camera around and show you the setting that we have access to. All right, so this is the RPM source. So right now it's off the pickup like we showed you. There is a option here which is gear ratio. So right here, what that number is we manipulate that based on wheel tire height, rear gear, and the roller based on the diameter of that. So the way we calibrate it is you get to 2,000 RPM in 1-to-1 gear ratio on the transmission, and we change that number until my reading back here on the dyno, right, until this reading matches my tach in the car. If I do that, then the reading will be accurate. Now, this is the problem that you can run into if that number is not accurate. Again, we have to remember, these dynos think you're in 1-to-1 gear ratio, okay? So, other manufacturers of dynos have different ways of picking up. They have optical sensors where you put a piece of tape on the crank sensor, and it literally is a light that flashes, right? Kind of like the old school days of checking timing. So it relies on that, spinning around. That specific dyno, I operated one. It was a DYNO back in the day. It either had that option, you had the pickup. If you don't use the pickup because your spark's off or you can't get a good signal, the other way is you would physically input in the computer when you hit the start button and when you hit the stop button. Okay? Now let's think about that. You're relying on your human reaction to start it at the exact same time and then finish it at the exact same time. So, example, I put in the computer, I'm going to hit the start at 2,000 RPM. I'm going to start my dyno pull. I'm going to finish at 7,000 RPM. Okay? So the computer does the equation based on the wheel speed that it sees from its roller, and then goes from, okay, they hit the start button, it's 2,000 RPM. They calculate the time when they hit the stop button. They use that time and the mile an hour of the roller to determine this is the torque and horsepower. Now the problem with that is if somebody were to say they inputted 2,000 RPM is when they're starting and 7,000 is when they're finishing, and they don't hit the start button until 3,000 RPM, the dyno does not have any idea. It is basing it off of, hey, at 2,000 RPM, this is the mile an hour I saw at 2,000, and it's revving to 7, and they stopped it at 7, right? So what you have to look at then there is compare those dyno graphs. If you're 500, 1,000 RPM off, all of a sudden you're going to see peak horsepower move drastically because, again, the computer thinks, hey, it started at 2,000 and went to 7,000, so I'm going to graph it on that scale based on the speed I saw and the time it took to get there. But if they hit that button late, like 500 RPM, and then stopped at 500 RPM sooner, the graph will show the RPM of 2,000 to 7,000, even though they hit it at 25 and 65. So it's going to change where that peak horsepower number is, and it's going to increase the power because the speed at which it completed that distance was quicker. So you got to be careful.
Is there a way that you can, just by looking at a dyno graph, you can tell if it's been manipulated like that?
Yeah, the biggest piece you see on that, mainly it's dyno comms because they give that option for the start-stop on the button. I don't know if the modern Mustang dynos have the ability. I do know DynoCom has it. But if you look at a dyno graph and the start point is identical both at stop and finish. So if you have a graph that goes from 2,000 to 7,000 RPM and it stops and starts exactly at the same point, that usually is a sign that that's the way that it was being done, okay? Now, we can edit dyno graphs, I can tell you that. Sometimes, you know, when we, you know, rev out and it shifts on its own, we can go in and edit the graph. They have filters and stuff like that. So you can generally see dyno graphs be very close, but especially on DynoCons, if you see a start on both, you know, an overlay dyno is the exact same for start and finish, but you see like the peak horsepower number, right? Let's say somebody adds 10 pounds of boost and they go, oh, it added 500 horsepower at this given spot, but peak horsepower was 1,000 RPM sooner. Kind of weird that you would peak 1,000 RPM sooner by adding 10 pounds, but, you know, it would fall off up top aggressively. So generally, if you see a perfect start and stop on a filter, that's a good sign. Now, some of the new softwares have the ability to do it, but that's generally a good sign to see. If you have two overlaying stuff where they made minor changes, but the peak number is 1,000 RPM different, or it just doesn't, the graphs don't look the same, right? You know, generally, you know, you're going to have a graph that will spread very equally. But if you have it where they're overlaid like this and the peak is real soon and falls off real aggressive, that's usually a sign. The other thing you got to be careful of is, like I said, in regards to dyno jet, it's much harder to manipulate a dyno jet, which is why I like it. I can do it if I put the incorrect gear ratio. So as an example, I put it in and, you know, on the dyno it shows 2,000 RPM, but in the car it's 3,000 RPM and I rev it out, it's going to give me a higher reading. So the calibration is very important. That's why we go through and recalibrate often. But we usually use an RPM signal and keep our results consistent. So that's something you want to look forward to. Now, this is also something, I'm going to switch it over for some feedback. So, to give an example, what I have here is dyno numbers for two bone stock TRXs. Bone stock. Now, obviously, there's a manipulation in regards to different days, different dynos, right? But if you can see, we have here, you know, peak numbers are right where they should be. A little variable here, and I'm going to show you why. If you look at the RPM, it's equal, right? Now, this is something and why sometimes you'll see dyno graphs. Yep. Here, hold this. Oh. I need both hands.
Oh God.
All right. So now what you'll see.
I'm getting serious, y'all.
Why this is very skewed. So this would be somebody go, oh, I picked up, you know, 20 horsepower and 40 foot-pounds of torque by a tune. Well, I'm going to show you something. This is literally a bone stock tune either way. All right. Now, this is what happens when you go to speed, right? So this is the speed of the rollers. So this is the mile an hour the back tire was seeing at any given time. So this is fourth gear. The red is fourth gear versus the blue with his fifth gear. So naturally, the time it takes for that to pull from the speed, right? So you'd go, hey, well, how come the red line is much shorter but the horsepower reading is lower, right? Because it's the time it takes to go from one speed to the other. So although the fifth gear pull is a longer pull, so I'll go over the time to show you, it's the time it takes to go from here to here, and that determines what the torque is, and then the horsepower is the calculation. So although this one is shorter, it only goes up to, what, just over 95 miles an hour, right? 96 mile an hour is where it goes, right? So because it goes from 35 to 96 versus 45 to 100 and almost 30, that is why the blue line, although it takes longer, is showing a higher number. So again, go back to time, so you can see that fourth gear pull from when I hit that start button, which we had an RPM signal on it, so that's when I hit the button, to the end is just about 3.5 seconds versus the fifth gear pull is closer to 6. So even though the pull is longer, it makes and reads out more horsepower. Now, if I were to go, for example, to this fourth gear pull and change the gear ratio on it, right, and tell it that, oh, that gear ratio is going to 160 miles an hour, then naturally that number would bump up. So that's why you got to be very, very, very careful. Very careful on what you see, what's posted, and everything like that.
What to believe.
Yeah, what to believe. So, you know, also, like I said, back in the day, I haven't operated a Mustang dyno in a while, so I may be incorrect now, but they used to have the ability where you just could put in your correction, literally go in and do 1.06, right? So what I'll do now is I'll switch these over. So to give an example, it was 574 and 555 was the output. So now I'm going to show you what uncorrected looks like. So this is why you see guys with filters all the time, and they're talking about STD, SAE, and stuff like that. A lot of people use SAE. We just keep STD because, not because it reads high or anything. It's just kind of what we started with, and we just kind of stuck it out. So I will show you what uncorrected is on those given days for those two dyno pools. So 574 and 555, right? So this is what a correction factor does at STD, because both of those were done in the summer. So 553 to 524, right? So we lost a ton of power by, as you can see, uncorrected, okay? Uncorrected, you can see it dropped a lot of power. So what that means is the correction factor added, I want to say it was like 5%, just based on that. You know, and it just, like I said, goes to show you. I'm going to show you another thing that a lot of shops might use. And, you know, we use a smoothing factor of 5 any given time. So now we're going to go over.
What does the smoothing factor mean for those
You're
who don't
going to
know?
see. All right. So if you see, smoothing factor, what it does, remember, this RPM signal was picked up off a coil. So naturally, RPM can bounce a little bit, so you can see how unsmooth it is, right? That's essentially what it does, is it basically connects the given points to try and just give you a smoother line. So this is an uncorrected, unsmooth dyno graph. So you can see it's not very pretty, right? Now the other thing is when you get to higher horsepower cars, sometimes these lines can really fluctuate and bounce. So the correction factor, sometimes I've seen shops where they'll do an uncorrected or, you know, a smoothing factor of a lower number because as it bounces, the spike gave it a little bit more horsepower. You know what I'm saying? So I really don't care at the end of the day what the number is, as long as it's safe and it is what it is. I've actually told people I'm not going to keep chasing numbers and things like that. But this just goes to show you in a way of, if you focused solely on a number like this, how, there's so many variables with it, from smoothing to the correction factor to the type of dyno to the way you can manipulate the correction factor built into it, the actual readout, right? The RPM is a reference that the dyno is relying on, stating you're in 1-to-1 gear ratio, and you're going to reference the RPM in 1-to-1 gear ratio. So again, the gear you do it in can change your output. Generally what we see, even though there's a torque multiplication factor, is, as you see right here, the lower the gear, the lower horsepower and torque number it actually displays. So we always see horsepower and torque kind of jump up as we go to higher gears. So do keep that in mind as well. If you see a real low torque output or real low torque output compared to another graph side by side, it could be based on the gear ratio that they did it again. All based on that, right? So that's right, Chris. We focus on time slips too, but dynos are nice tuning tools for numbers and stuff. So let's head on over to the office. We'll do our should you, could you. Off your phone too, while you're on the clock.
Whoa! I'm interacting with our live chat.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, way to recover on that one.
Oh, God.
Joe's running.
It smells so good.
Running away, Joe.
Yeah, no responsibilities today. Nope. Do anything we can
Good
shop.
customer of ours brought us some chicken food.
Yeah, it
so I'm
smells
gonna
so good.
Close the door while
I'm salivating. Ready for some could you, should yous, J-Dog?
well, let's do it.
All right.
What do you got
First
first?
one. Will you make more power with a 91 or 93 dedicated pulley and tune and then an E85 dedicated pulley and tune, or the flex fuel setup?
Perfect.
Pros and cons of both.
Yeah, so obviously having, the first actual true flex fuel system that does display ethanol on the dash. It's been doing that for 4+ years. So I've heard this a lot, that where other tuners that don't offer a flex fuel or something like that will say, hey, a dedicated E85 tune is going to make more power than a flex fuel tune. Why? Right? Because if you have E85 or 85% ethanol in the tank, okay, a proper flex fuel tune will deliver an E85 tune. Okay. Now this is where, sure, an 85 tune, E85 specific tune, might make more power if you're at E70 because you have an E85 tune that is, running on an E70 octane, or, ethanol-based gas, right? So we really have to understand what flex fuel is doing. So as your ethanol content drops, the requirement for fueling drops as well. So we have to reduce the amount of fuel that is delivered. The other thing is octane drops, right? Now, think about it this way. When you have 80% ethanol, we know what the octane is of ethanol. We know what anti-knock characteristics it has. Now, there's a big variable, that 20%. If you fill up at a pump gas station, is that 20% 93? Or is that pump gas 87? Or is it worse? Nobody really knows, right? So when you fill up and it's not out of a barrel, you're relying on that, whatever's not ethanol, and trying to figure out what that octane is, right? So from 87 to 93 in parts like this, that's a 6% variance, or 6-point variance of octane level. So that means if you have 20% of it in there, it will change your octane. So I personally wouldn't want to run a aggressive E85 tune if I have 70 or 65% ethanol in the tank, because that is now 30 or 35% unknown octane being mixed with ethanol, right? So that's why, when people say, oh, a dedicated E85 tune is going to make more power, well, sure, if you have it tuned and it's an E85 tune, that means it's set up and designed thinking there is 85% ethanol in your fuel, meaning that 15%, even if it's 87, is going to have minimal effect compared to if you're at 70% ethanol. So the importance of flex fuel is that it should properly adjust timing and fuel at the same time, because yes, you don't necessarily want as aggressive of a tune if your ethanol is not E85. That is the benefit. And our flex fuel can bleed boost at any given percentage that I tell it to. So naturally, if you're a big boosted application, you don't want to go, have an E85 tune with 60% ethanol and have all the boost, right? We can bleed it. But same thing, you don't want to run an E85 tune if you have 65% ethanol. And a flex fuel tune will deliver a 65% ethanol tune or an 85% ethanol tune based on the ethanol reading. So that's your answer. So same thing on pump gas. It'll produce, the same, once you get down to 10% ethanol, the tune will produce the same power as a dedicated pump gas tune. So that's kind of the answer for that one. But we do get asked it a lot. I understand what people post on the internet, but what's that? Oh, pump E85 versus X85 race fuel. So again, pump E85, we'll use Illinois for example. If you read at the pumps, pump E85 can vary from 55% ethanol to 85% ethanol at any given time. So the unknown is what you're mixed with. X85 race fuel, Satera Spice, right? I will reference our Satera Spice that we offer. What is it and why is it different? So even if you get a good pump E85 at 85% ethanol and you pump it in your tank, right? Again, you don't know what that octane is of that race gas, or the 15% gas, right? Could be 87, 89, 91, 93.
Who knows?
Maybe 100. Maybe they felt good that day and threw it in. Where canned E85 fuels will be able to tell you what it is. So X85, Ignite Red, so on and so forth, they are, I'll use Satera Spice, is 85% ethanol, and the 15% non-ethanol fuel is 118 octane gas. So the working octane of Satera Spice is 116 octane. It's controlled. We know what's in there. That's the difference. So does it make more power? Not necessarily. Can it make more power safely? Yeah, absolutely. It's controlled. You know what it is. Yes, you can order Satera Spice from us. You can call in. We can have it shipped to you in 5-gallon bales, 55-gallon drums, whatever you need. So we get it from Out Front Race Fuels. Big shout out to them to come up with it like they did for us and got the blend nailed. So it is it's what we run in all our cars. And again, we'll go to other fuels. I won't use specifics on names. We went over a couple of them. You guys can do the research on what. But again, let's think about it. If I have a race gas out of a can, you can come in, Joe. It's okay. If you have a race can, right, and it's and it tells you it's E90, right? There's a point where the benefits of ethanol in regards to the cooling factor and the anti-knock and everything like that start to become a strain on a fuel system, right? 98. I've heard people say they put X98 or 98% ethanol out of a jug into their car. So you're running 98% ethanol all the time. Well, guess what? My Satera Spice at 85% ethanol actually has higher octane. So I'm not straining my fuel system as much. I don't need as large of an injector or worry about my third fuel pump failing and stuff because I'm not stressing the fuel system as much. So same thing at 90% ethanol with 10% race gas. So even if they mix it with the same 118 octane, technically it's going to be a lower octane than the Satera Spice. So that's why I chose 85%. One, because generally most people will mix it with gas they read or fill up onto the racetrack and then fill it up. So the 85, I would put it at 80% honestly if it was a dedicated setup. But the 85 helps spike the ethanol a little higher, but it has a beautiful 116 octane setup to it. So that's the difference between out of the pump versus out of a can. So that's something to consider in that variable. That's why on our flex fuel cars, our high horsepower cars, we put ethanol gauges so we can truly see what fuel is being delivered into the engine, so we can appropriately put the tune in it. And like I said, with our flex fuel comes with it, the tune will self-adjust based on that as well. So canned is controlled. You know what you're putting in your tank as long as it's a quality canned fuel, and there's less variables of what is actually being consumed by the engine. So. What else?
Pros and cons of leaded gas. Since we're in this gas talk.
There you go. Yeah, so the old school race gas, right? So lead in, obviously a lot of leaded race gases are higher octane, so the octane's beautiful. The lead is generally used for kind of a cooling and coating type setup. So it works, absolutely. Less strain on the fuel system. C16 is kind of a go-to. Q16 is oxygenated leaded race gas, so kind of a pro and con there. But the lead over time can destroy sensors, spark plugs. You have to change your spark plugs quicker. That's why we're also fans of V85. It burns clean. Even with the race gas. I get a little residue on my tailpipes from it, just a little bit. It smells nice, but it's nowhere near as corrosive as that of a true leaded race gas that's run specifically for it. If it's race car specific, you understand what goes with it. So, but that's what it's kind of the cooling agent behind it, and they say it helps coat things and stuff. But when run a lot, it's more of an additive that can eat through some sensors and things like that. So, yeah, that's kind of what it's for.
Now, one from not exactly a question that was asked to us, but something I have seen.
Yeah.
Let's say you have a Scat or an RT or something. Maybe intake catback, nothing really crazy.
Yeah.
If you come across a gas station that's selling 100 octane fuel, is that going to give you better performance?
Not if you're not tuned for it. So, just putting higher octane fuel in doesn't mean it's going to go faster. Now, the whole point of higher octane is anti-knock resistance. So what it would do is reduce, potential for knock episodes. So if your car has bad gas, you have 87 in it, and it's pulling timing out as you're racing it or driving it, and you put higher octane and it removes those, it'll feel faster. So it doesn't necessarily add horsepower, but it helps prevent the reduction of horsepower from detonation and ping and everything like that. So then on top of it, if it removes it, you might be able to run more timing or a more aggressive tune, allowing for the game. Sorry, I spin on you.
Oh. Okay, I thought it was a bug.
Nope, I saw it fly. Anyways, but so that's the thing. Just throwing it in, it's not necessarily going to cause harm. It's not necessarily going to improve anything. But if you have a car that's really unhappy and knocking a lot, it might help and make it more consistent. You hear us say that all the time. It makes the power more consistent and reduces the ability for knock. So, and yes, you can get a more aggressive tune, but just pumping it in, you're not necessarily going to gain horsepower.
As a tuner, how do you feel about when people use fuel additives? Like if someone has only 91 and they add butane or something, how do you feel?
So I get it. We want as much power as we can out of it, and butane is probably the most popular, and it does exactly what it's advertised. It bumps octane up significantly. Remember, it's a concentrate, so you got to be conscious when dumping it in a tank what it does. It will eat through plugs in, spark plugs, O2 sensors, any sensors that the fuel will come over. It can destroy cats a lot quicker. So I do recommend it a lot for guys one time to the track and they want, they're a tenth away from a goal they want, want a little extra timing. Or I do recommend it a lot for some quick diagnostic. For example, if we're tuning a car and you're on pump gas and I'm seeing signs of detonation, I'll tell people to throw race gas in or a little bit of octane booster, and then we change nothing and see if that detonation goes away. Good way to kind of troubleshoot and verify if it's a fuel quality issue or verify if it is true detonation that we're experiencing, so we know how to adjust the tune. It's okay every now and then to run it consistently. I don't like the side effects of it, and feel that there are other options available that don't have that effect, because there are higher octane gases don't necessarily corrode in the same fashion. So, but to run it all the time, I'm not a fan. But it does have its purpose for pending the application.
What about I guess kind of follow-up question? Not so much for performance, more for like fun. What about the things you add to your gas to make it smell different?
Are you talking about us trying to figure out the smell for our race gas?
Maybe.
Yeah. So we've been talking about we have the option to change the smell of our gas. So we've been going back and forth trying to figure out what we should make it smell like.
I think broccoli.
I think peanut butter, but you know, that's something that's new to me. I can't even speak on it. You know, I don't know about trying to make it smell any certain way. Leave it to the pros on that. They even warned us that they can add the normal additive, make it smell a certain way, but based on the fuel we run, it might not work. But I don't know anything about that. I can't even talk to that. That has no performance enhancing abilities in any way, shape, or form. It's just a stink. So.
Gotcha.
What other questions? Any others?
What was it? I had one that
I thought so too. I thought if walking by a car and it smells like peanut butter, plus it's very distinct, right? So anybody at track will start learning that's Terra Spice. But we'll see. We'll see.
Have to figure something out on that one.
I did see you mentioned our 3D printed intake versus our billet intake. So for those that haven't caught in previous, as you can see, if you guys haven't gotten a good view, so that's a massively tall 3D printer behind us there. And we have our other printers working on the prototypes. So we are in the works of finalizing our steps for, we will offer full lines of 3D printed intake manifolds, and we have hopefully early next week, our 5-axis mill is being dropped off from Haas. So we got rid of our 3-axis and our single spindle lathe. For the billet evolution side, they upgraded to a 5-axis mill and a dual spindle lathe. So it's expanding the capabilities of what we can offer. So that 3D printed intake manifold we are bringing to market will now be offered as a billet intake manifold. We are working with TIC Performance to offer multiple options for air-to-water intercooler systems that will be bolt-on to the intake manifold. They will be optimized for NA performance with adjustable runners as well. So based on your torque motor, cam profile, RPMs you will be referencing, we can put the proper runner length in it so you're not just stuck with a shorter, long, or mid-length runner. You can tweak it and adjust it as you wish. Pros and cons. Naturally, a billet one is going to cost more. It's just cost of materials, takes more time. So you know, the reason we wanted to do a 3D printed version is going to be to offer a more budget friendly. Now, for those that don't understand 3D printing, pros and cons to it, I used last night as an example. So, you know, we will be offering this for a red eye Hellcat that has a 3.8 Whipple with a big old throttle body and wants to go to it's mainly for red eyes, to a factory airbox. So we test fit it, works perfect. IAT bung, drops right in, right? So
it's tough too.
It's tough. Now, if you want to hand me the other piece.
That one?
So, yep, this is what happens as you learn to dial in a 3D printer. Now, it might be hard to see.
Flip it the other way.
No, I'm just showing the light so you can see, right? Yeah. So this is part of the dial-in process. Here, turn the light on above us so that might help out too.
That would help.
There we go.
The camera.
Right?
Is it fine?
It's fine.
Okay.
Right, this is part of the dial-in process. So, now think about how long this took, right? We started to print last night on 2 printers, came in this morning, and power went out last night. So we lost those prints. A full intake manifold could take us over 100 hours to print. So it's one of those things, although it's going to be cheaper, it could take us, you know, a very, very long time to print one successfully. So that's the downside to the 3D printing world and why it's still in its infant stages. So got to dial them in. Once you dial them in, you're good, but as long as that printer can go for the 100 hours without interruption, you'll have a beautiful product, as you saw by that inlet tube. So it's just part of the stages of dialing it in. Where, you know, with the 5-axis, it's a lot, I would say, easier since we kind of know what we're doing with it, but the cost for the materials and the tooling and the machines themselves, so naturally the cost is higher. So both will be capable of the same thing. They're going to be designed the same, look the same, they're going to use the same intercoolers, they're going to function the same, have the same capabilities. It's just the cost variance, the look, and, you know, just the production time, right? Although the 3D printed one will be on the lower cost side just because of cost of materials, they do take longer to make. Right. Billet one, we can do it a lot quicker. You know, it'll be a couple days and we'll have them printed. So within 2 to 3 weeks, we'll be showing and installing our first billet intake manifold with the air-to-water intercooler and opening up orders for those. The 3D printed one, we are hustling away, Chris. We are almost there. We are cooking in the container next to Tulo the final stage for the filament we're using for it.
We are.
So
It's kind of warm.
the machine behind him is printing one of the runners right now. So
You see it moving?
you see it moving. So we are in the final stages. We got it. The machine's dialed in. We're excited. So we should have that to you very soon. But they will be available to everybody. The beautiful thing about it, you know, we are actually going to do collaborations where our 3D, our billet version of the intake manifold, we are going to 3D print snouts that we can bolt onto it to change the location and direction of the throttle body, right? So if you have a Helium twin turbo kit and you want an air-to-water intercooler, kind of like my truck has, where I have the gutted blower, I want to put it on, you know, we'll have a front-facing inlet for a throttle body. Well, if you want a snout where the factory Hellcat, you know, snout would go, 3D print it. Why you know, increase the cost of the material? The plastic actually has better characteristics in regard to heat transfer, and heat soak is reduced. So we'll be able to 3D print the snout location wherever you want.
Truck manifolds,
right?
5.7, 6.4s,
Right.
all of it.
We're excited about it because, for example, on my truck, everybody knows TRXs. Over on the driver's side, there's everything. There's fuse panels, batteries, computers, you know what I mean? Everything's over there. That's where the snout goes. What we're doing is we're 3D printing the snout to go over to the passenger side because I don't need that's better.
There's a bunch of room.
And then I don't need to have the 180 charge pipe going to my billet intake manifold, but you know, I'll have a 3D printed snout. I don't care. It's going to work the same. It's going to hold the boost. There's no negatives to it other than if the printer fails, right? But so yeah, we're going to have those options available. We're very excited. I know a lot of people have been patiently waiting to get these pieces in motion and to get a 5-axis. We worked really hard, so thank you again to all our customers, our supporters. We jumped in head first. Joe's really excited, nervous, but we're excited to finally bring this out for everybody here. So it's going to benefit everybody in the Gen 3 community, whether you're an NA Scat Pack 5.7 all the way up to a 1,500 horsepower twin turbo setup. So we are very, very excited for it and what's to come. We also are going to be, I'll spill the beans, we're going to be porting the heads on it. We're going to be, we got a machine large enough to do custom wheels as well. So we have a lot in store. We're very excited what to see happen in the next year or so with these machines and what we're bringing. So yeah, so it's coming very soon. I hope he's ready for it.
I'll be doing it. Yep.
Don't worry, Tulo's not doing it. Anyways, thanks again, guys, for checking in. Keep the questions coming. We'll use them for next week, and you know, we'll see you soon.
Don't forget, before we leave, new hats.
Oh yeah,
new hats, skull caps. We got shirts, sweatshirts. We got what you need. Stickers too. Don't forget.
All right, guys.
So
hit that link. Thank you for checking in. We'll see you next week.